We basically what's going to happen is Jeffrey's going to tell me a story, okay, and because there may be so many different components to an emotional situation, like let's say for example you're dealing with somebody and they just broke up, okay, you know, if he tells me like all these different components of what happened and this and she said this and she said that and he did this and he did that and then this guy beat me up or I beat him up or whatever the case may be, all of these, you know, there's lots of different facets to that story that can cause a lot of different emotional problems. You know, getting beat up, for example, you know, getting hurt really bad in a fight, you know, especially for males, you know, it attacks the ego structure, makes them feel worthless. Even if they got jumped and there was nothing they could do about it, you know, it really kind of kicks their butt every day because of that. I worked on a guy one time who he walked out of a bar in Texas, I think it was, and for no apparent reason, some guy came out of nowhere and punched him right in the nose. And I mean, did a good job of it because I mean, it really broke his nose and pushed it over to the side. He never had any reconstructive surgery done on anything, but it happened 5 years before he came to see me. And I asked him, you know, how do you feel about all that? He says, well, I've pretty much gotten over all that. You know, I put it behind me. But I could tell that he hadn't put it all the way behind him because you really can't put things like that behind you until you've removed the energy pattern. And that's just a fact. Unless you've done some type of prayer or something, and usually you really need somebody to pray for you in conjunction with that if you really want it to be completely gone, you know. But you have to do some type of energy work on that pattern to be completely free of it, in all honesty. So before we move on to the story technique, just for good measure, on the trauma we were talking about earlier, what number? Okay, not even a number. Fantastic. Just wanted you to see that because I figured that would be the case. That's just how it works. So with the story, we're going to do one technique verbally where he's going to tell me the story of something, whatever it may be, and I'm going to continue to do my technique the whole time. And then we're going to do one where he's telling me a story in his mind. And of course I can't hear what he's saying, but it doesn't matter anyway because nothing's going to change. Let's say the story's too embarrassing for him or too spiritually disrupting for him. He just doesn't want to say it out loud, or he couldn't bring himself to tell me. You know, he feels that, you know, for whatever reason I may feel bad about him or something to that effect. So it doesn't matter. Either way is very applicable. It's fine. You know, it'll work just the same either way. So let's do the story tapping technique verbally first, and then we'll do one non-verbally. So now the story tapping technique. Okay, so Jeffrey, I'm going to take his finger here, and Jeffrey's going to tell me a story that is upsetting to him, okay? Something that he doesn't mind verbalizing, talking about. And the whole time that he's talking to me, I'm really not going to pay attention so much to what he's saying. I'm just going to concentrate in my mind on doing the search for all, remove all, clear all. But I'm going to keep repeating it over and over again about at that rhythm. The rhythm's almost irrelevant, but I mean, that's about, so you don't have to squeeze your finger to death and mash theirs into a pancake. You know, that's about a good way of doing it. So as he's telling me the story, I'm going to be doing the search for all, remove all, clear all. So you go ahead, tell me the story.
I was about 4 or 5, and we had got a call that morning about my grandfather. He had had a heart attack while he was driving, and he had passed away. Well, as they were taking him away, all I can remember was me yelling, "Poppy," towards him and wanting him, and just wanting to hold him. Because me and him were really close.
Okay. And on a scale of 1 to 10, which I should have asked him first, but I can do it immediately afterwards. You know, how bad would that bother you?
Terrible.
Yeah, terrible. So I mean, it's just, you know, even more than a 10. So you know, it's a very devastating type of thing. So as long as he's talking, I'm going to continue doing the technique. But as soon as he stops talking, I might do a couple more clicks, and then that's about it. So we give that a couple of minutes on the clock to run. And so all I'm doing again is just, you know, clicking the finger in succession, doing my search for all, remove all, clear all technique. as he's saying it, is cleaning up the energies. Nothing new here. So this is just a nice little way to get multifaceted emotional content. So it's like you have somebody who wants to tell you their whole life story. Let them. Okay. But I'm going to show you a technique when we get done with the story tapping that you can go into and do. We call list therapy, and that really saves a lot of time. But we'll go into that in a minute. So I'm going to ask Jeffrey, how do you feel about all that happened, all that you were telling me about a minute ago?
It's going down.
Okay. All right. Now, just for camera purposes, I'm going to demonstrate something here. Okay. I'm going to ask Jeffrey to tell me the same story as close to the original way that he told it as he can. All right. So this would be like running through the technique again, and you watch what happens to his story. It kind of gets different, or it changes. And I don't mean like, oh, well, he didn't use this word, I mean, it will really change. He'll start to lose a lot of the detail, or the story will kind of get shorter. So, tell me the whole story, just like you told me a minute ago.
We got a call that morning about my grandfather. He had a heart attack while he was driving his truck, and he ended up crashing. And so when they went to take him away, all I can remember was me yelling, "Grandpa."
Okay. All right. Because you notice when I initially asked him about that, even though he knew I was going to ask him about that, he had to stop for a minute and think about it. It didn't just come to him just like that all of a sudden. Because I really should wait a couple of minutes before I ask him to repeat it, but it's a little bit premature, but you get the idea. You notice how there wasn't a whole lot of emotion and conviction behind what he was telling me. It was kind of like he was telling me maybe a sad story or something that he saw on TV rather than something that he actually lived through, like when he told me the first time. So that would be running through it again. So if he had told me that it dropped from a 10 to a 5 or something, I might have asked him to run through, and it leveled off. I might have asked him to tell me the story again, and I'll simply tap it again. So, one more time, okay? Can you tell me that whole story again with as much detail as you can remember?
That morning, we got a call saying that my grandpa had crashed, and all I can remember was me yelling "Grandpa" to him as they took him away.
Okay. All right. Notice how the story has gotten really compressed now. Okay. There's still some underlying feelings there, but they're breaking up. You can see it on him, and I can feel the energy exchange. So I'm going to ask him now. It's still premature. I should wait at least with such a. He picked a really good story. So I should really give this about 4 or 5 minutes, but just for the time's sake of the camera, I was like, what number would you attribute to that whole thing now?
7 and dropping.
Okay, 7 and dropping. So even though I can see that he's doing much better superficially on it, it's not affecting him nearly as bad as it was, he still rates it as a 7 because there's still some deep hurt in there. But I can see, just by looking at his eyes and feeling his energy presence, that it is dropping. And so I would agree with what he's saying. I would not necessarily have rated it so high, but he can detect much more in his body than I can detect. Mine's just a general observation of energy and physiology. And, he's actually living in there, so he knows what's going on. And that's a lot of problem with some therapists and doctors, is that you should listen to your client and your patients and ask them and take into consideration what their feelings are before you pass a conclusion of some type. So let's ask again. What number would you give to that now?
5.
Okay, does it feel flatlined or is it still dropping?
It's going down.
Okay, now I feel pretty comfortable to say that will drop off. So I'm going to switch to the nonverbal method, okay? And we're going to come back to that story about his grandfather again, and we're going to check and see how that turned out. And I'm not going to cut the camera. We're just going to go straight into it, so you can get a real time lapse for what has happened.